Hi everyone, welcome back to the Hideaway. Are you all okay? So last Christmas, I was playing this game round our next door neighbour's house in their kitchen. And whilst I was playing, I was thinking to myself, actually, this would be pretty good fun to play out in the garden, like a garden size version of it, a bit like that kind of garden size Jenga that you can get. Um, so I thought to myself, actually, that sounds like a project to me. So that's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to make a garden size version of this ring and hook game. Let's see how we get on. So for the dimensions for this game, I was thinking 1 metre 15 for the top. I had some spare CLS in my wood store for this, which was perfect. For the centre post, I was thinking about a metre. I thought that was going to be plenty tall enough. For the base I went with 60 centimetres. That was going to be wide enough to support the game. Then it was over to the table saw. I decided to take the edge off the CLS timber, which has this rounded edge to it, which may have caused me issues with the joinery idea that I had. So I thought I'll just take off the edge of it, and it might just make things just a little easier later on down the line. I wanted the centre post to be square, and oddly enough I couldn't find a square post in my local wood merchant, which was a bit weird, so I made one. And once that's done, clamp everything together nice and tight. I'll then trim it down to size on the table saw a bit later. So for the base and the top, I've decided to use a cross halving joint, which is, I've got this little mock-up here that, so it would look like that and like that, and then they just sit together like so. And then going through, this will be on the base, so going through the base I've got one of these threaded inserts which they use on furniture, I think. And I'm going to go through this top piece and the bottom piece, and then with the upright, this is just like a makeshift upright, I've got a dowel screw that will go into the upright and then screw in like so.
like so. So that screws into this piece and this piece, keeping everything together. Then with the top, I'm not going to do the same with the top. I'm going to use a threaded insert to go into the top, and then through the top cross piece, I'm going to use one of these screws here to go down into the top. So that's my plan. First of all, I just need to mark up the cross halving joint on both the base and the top, and I'll do that on the table saw. I was going to use the trenching facility on the mitre saw, but I think the table saw will probably be easier, so I'll do that now. To mark up for the cross halving joint, I sit one piece on top of the other, then make sure the top piece is centered so you have equal distance on either side of it, and then use a speed square just to make sure that it's all squared up, and then mark it up with a marking knife, and then I do exactly the same on the other piece. I use a pencil here just to darken the lines so it's a little bit more visible. I then need to set the depth of the cut, so I just follow the lines round to the side of the piece, use a depth gauge just to note the thickness of the piece, and then that needs to be divided by 2, and that gives me the depth of the cut. I then mark it up on the side of the piece, and then it's over to the table saw. I raise the height of the blade to the height that I've marked up. I'm just eyeballing it here. If I need to take more material out, I can just sand it down a bit later on. On my table saw, I added a sacrificial fence screwed onto the sliding mitre gauge, made the initial cuts on either side, and then cleared out the rest. There you go. I think it's too bad. Oh, a little bit of play in it, but yeah, it might be a little bit shallow in some places, but pretty happy. Okay, let's have a look at the other one. Ah, nice. Yep, pretty happy with that. Yeah, a little bit of play again, but not too fussed about that. But yeah, that's pretty smooth. Yep, pretty happy. I'm pleased by that. Excellent. Then it was back to the table saw again. After the glue had dried for the centre post that I'd made, it was just to square everything up. Then it was time to add the threaded inserts to the base. So here I'm just finding the centre. I then drill a hole, not too big, because I need the threaded insert to bite, and then use an Allen key just to tighten it all up, and I do that on both the top part and the bottom part of the base. Then it was time to add the dowel screw into the centre post. So again, I find the centre, drill a hole large enough, to allow the dowel screw to be screwed in but still nice and tight. Then it was time for the top. So I was struggling to think of a way to clamp this in place because I wanted to go through the top as a unit and then directly into the post. So I was just using gravity here. So went through the whole of the top and down into the post. I then add another threaded insert into the top, going relatively slowly. I was very aware of going into the end grain. Then it was time for a dry fit and checking for upright. So when I checked the upright, there was a bit of a gap, but my thinking was because there was just one screw going into the upright coming through the base, and I probably didn't drill perfectly perpendicular, that's probably affected it, but I wasn't overly fussed. Okay, moment of truth. I'm going to bring it outside because this thing's pretty big. So cool. A bit of a wobble just down there, but I think that's just my block paving down here, so I'm not too bothered about that. I might put some feet on the base, so that might help it out. But yeah, pretty happy with that. So for nothing other than aesthetics, I decided to cut a bit of an angle on the top pieces. I just picked a random angle on a miter saw and just chopped off the ends. There's no science to it at all. So I decided to add a rounded edge to the base and to the top. I'm using my DeWalt palm router to do this. Some of you might be thinking, hang on a minute, didn't you cut off the rounded edge of the CLS earlier on? It's like, yeah, and you'd be right, I did. That was to aid in the joinery part of the project earlier on, but this was more for the finish, and I thought a rounded edge would look a little bit nicer. Then it was on to some sanding. For the upright, I didn't want to route the edges, it was just a personal choice, so I used some sandpaper on plywood to dull the edges. Then I sanded the top and the base to a 120 grit, ready for the finish. Just before I applied the finish, I thought I needed to have some kind of scoring system for the game. So here I'm just measuring out some points on the base, and I then used a Forstner bit to drill some markings for counters that can be used for scoring. I ended up using an old broom handle for the counters, just chopping up into 4 bits, and it worked perfectly. So it was on to the finish, and I decided to wood burn this one. I've done it before, as you've seen in other videos that I've made, and all I'm using here is just a weed burner, and it works perfectly. Now I know some of you quite like watching the wood burning and how I apply it, so instead of listening to me rabbiting on, I'll play some nice music so you can enjoy it.
So once all the wood burning was done, it was now down to the really laborious task of removing the excess charcoal. I'm just using a wire brush and the shop vac here, as it gets very messy very quickly. But this took a while. I chose to burn the wood intentionally, as burned wood adds a waterproof layer if done properly. And if this does end up being stored outside for whatever reason, then that will help. But I started to regret my decision, because this took a long time. So 30 years later, when I finally finish wire brushing, if I see another wire brush again, it'll be too soon. I decided to add some teak oil for even more protection. I wanted to use tung oil as it's slightly better than teak oil for exterior use, but I had this big bottle in the cupboard, so I just went with it. I applied several coats of the teak oil, and I decided to use a brush for the application. I was hoping that using a brush I could get a slightly thicker coat for that extra protection. These were the little counters that I made out of the broom handle that I mentioned earlier on, and again those were burnt just as the rest of the piece was, and just adding a little bit of teak oil to those as well. So it's time to add the hardware, but just before I add the screw eyes and hooks, I need to cut the cord that the rings were going to be tied to.
So I've cut some cord and I'm going to attach it to, this is going to be the ring that will be used in the game. I thought getting one of these little buckles would maybe make it a little easier, because then that way I can cut the cord to kind of almost whatever length, and then I can adjust it as necessary if it's maybe a little bit too long. So I'm just going to feed it into here and then back through, and then that end will attach to the top, and then I've actually got a little demo one here. So I can adjust it here, and then it would just dangle from the top there.
So with the cord cut, it was time to add the screw eyes into the top. I didn't use a drill for pilot hole in this. I just made a small hole and then just let them kind of like self-drive really. They were pretty easy to screw in. Then it was just tying the cord to the top and adding the rings to the bottom of the cord. I decided to add some feet to the bottom just for a little bit more stability on the base. I got some rubber feet from Amazon. I'll leave a link in the description. So just added a small pilot hole and then screwed them into the base. So the last thing was the hooks. Before drilling directly into the post, I thought I'd just put this little bit of plywood up just so I can gauge whereabouts it kind of needed to go, which helped quite a bit. And then I just drilled through the plywood. That gave me my little marker. Then I could gauge the other 3 hooks off the first one that I put in. Well, that was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed this one. It had a bit of everything for me. A new technique in joinery, which I've never done before, using the table saw. It was learnt a lot. Wasn't perfect, but it came out okay, I think, in the end. Did some wood burning, which I really enjoy. I really like the finish of it, and it just looks great fun. Can't wait to play it. So let me know what you think. Hopefully you've enjoyed the process and you've enjoyed watching. If you have, can I just please ask that you like and comment and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And to all my subscribers, thank you so much. It really means a lot for your dedication to the channel. It means so much to me. I've now hit 200 subscribers. I never thought that would ever happen. So thank you so much for helping me get to that milestone. It really means a lot, really does. So there's only one thing for it now. Let's go and play this thing. See you in the next one. Thank you.